guys, welcome to this new video of Kubernetes for beginners. Today we are going to talk about what is a pod, right? Today we talk about what is a pod. Now, in a simple language, the pod is the smallest element of the deployment, right? The pod is the smallest element in Kubernetes, the smallest element of the deployment in Kubernetes, and it represents a single instance of a running process in a cluster, right? It's the smallest element that represents a single instance of a running process in the cluster. So let's deep dive more into this to understand the meaning of what I just said. Now, unit of deployment, what does it mean? So a pod is like a deployable unit in Kubernetes. It encapsulates one or more container storage resources on configuration settings. So imagine a pod just like an envelope, and inside that envelope, you might have one or more containers, right? So it's just like an envelope, and inside that envelope, you might have one of more container. Now, let me go back to where I was. Now, in a simple language, a pod is just like a box you can deploy in Kubernetes. You put your stuff in, right? So just imagine like a pod like a box that you can deploy in Kubernetes, and you put stuff. So I look at a pod like just like a box that I have. Inside that box, I put whatever I want. Then I put that box in Kubernetes. That's what it's called, actually, a pod. So the next element that we are going to talk about, we said single instance. So each pod represents a single instance of a running process, such as an application or microservice. So it just means that we mentioned earlier, a pod is just like a box that you take the box, you put stuff in there, and you deploy in a cluster. Now, and also a pod also represents a single instance, right? Meaning that inside a pod, you have not a single application, but every single pod is there for a specific purpose. It might be representing like a microservice, all right? It might be representing a microservice of an application, for example. Let's imagine that you have an e-commerce, which is made, for example, of 4 containers. You have order, checkout, ship, and you have order, checkout, ship, and login. So you might end up having 4 pods with 4 containers, right? That's just a single instance. That's what it's called, single instance. Now, just to break this down, make it easy, like each pod represent one thing running in your Kubernetes cluster, like a single application or a smallest part of a file of your system, right? Each pod is there to serve for a specific business purpose, right? The business logic of each pod, for example, is logic. This is just what this one means. We say group of containers, for example, right? A pod can contain one or more container. So inside a pod, you can have one or multiple container at the same time. So this is just what this means, right? You can have one or multiple container at the same time. Now, we say common use case, for example, pod are commonly used to run a single containerization application, but they can also they can also be used for closely related processes that need to share resources and communicate with each other. Right, for example, and the last element is lifecycle management, right? Kubernetes manage the lifecycle of pod, including creation, scaling, termination, and rescheduling. Now, in a simple language, a pod is just an overlap around a container or containers. So inside a pod, you have container, and you can have a single container or you can have multiple container. Now, meaning that for your pod to be alive, you need at least one container. If there's no container in your pod will automatically die. And also, if one or more container in your pod is not running, the pod will be considered as dead as well. So the minimum number of containers you can have in a pod is 1, and a pod is just an overlap around container or containers in simple language, and this is the smallest element that is deployable in Kubernetes, right? That's the smallest element that deploy in Kubernetes. And also pod are ephemeral, right? Pod are ephemeral, meaning they can also die at any time, and Kubernetes actually manage the pod. Kubernetes can create pod, Kubernetes can scale pod, Kubernetes can terminate pod, Kubernetes can reschedule them. So that's just what is called Kubernetes pod. So it's just a smaller volume. So in other video, we are going to deep dive inside the pod and see exactly what we have inside the pod, like a volume like mtdr that stays inside the pod, and we will see how the container actually feed those volume. See you guys on the next video. Thank you.